The Rift is the newest objective in Deadlock with the patch on June 30th, and with that we saw a ton of buffs and nerfs. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the biggest winners and losers of this most recent patch. My name is DuckFilms, the current team analyst for Syndicate, so if you're a fan of Deadlock or you just like any of the analytics side, then this is definitely the channel for you. But anyways, let's dive straight in. Now, one of the biggest winners coming out of this patch has to be Shiv. Now, before you type into my comments saying, no, he got nerfed, he's bad, he sucks, let me just explain all the small details you might have missed. Now, while Shiv did receive a few targeted nerfs to keep him in check, Valve significantly increased his consistency, teamfight potential, and snowball power by moving some of his strongest upgrades into his base kit. Now, when it comes to his alternative fire, it now has a boon scaling of plus 0.2. This gives Shiv better scaling throughout the game. His alternative fire will continue to gain damage as he levels, making it a more threatening source of bursts in the mid and late game. However, when you look at the nerfs to it, the ammo consumption increased from 3 to 5 and the knockback movement is disabled while affected by slowing hex. Now, realistically, when you look at these specific changes, they're basically quality of life changes, and I mean this by increasing the ammo cost dramatically reduces how often Shiv can spam his shotgun blast before reloading, lowering his sustained damage and his movement capability. The slowing hex interaction also gives opponents a much better counterplay by preventing Shiv from using the knockback movement to escape or aggressively reposition. Now, this is somewhat of a mixed change. You get higher burst scaling with this right click, but on the flip side, you get much weaker sustain and pressure and mobility. All that being said though, when you have a character who's super tanky, does a lot of damage, and had a ton of movement, you have to choose one of the options really to pick at. And personally speaking, I think with the slowing hex to his right click, this is something that should have been implemented. Yes, controversial. But when you look at other characters with movement abilities, usually it's always all disabled. So this is just something that maybe should have been in the game already. Then you have his serrated knives. First, it was a buff. The cooldown reduced from 18 seconds to 16. Now, this is just a straightforward buff. More knife throws means more poke, better lane trading, higher bleed uptime, more opportunities to soften targets before diving, and it's a deceptively strong change because serrated knives are one of Shiv's primary tools for starting fights, although with the recent changes to Slice and Dice, this might not necessarily be the case anymore. When looking at Slice and Dice, there is two major changes that happen. The first is the damage type. It changed from 60 spirit damage to 75 light melee damage. This means the ability now scales and interacts with melee rather than spirit. So this means no longer can you buy Mystic Reverb on your 2, but you still have the opportunity to get some of that HP back with things like Life Strike, Spirit Snatch. Now, when you look at this from a bigger perspective, you understand that he's now less affected by Spirit Resist on the enemy team, and honestly, I think it fits a little bit better into his close range combo or combat style, so it makes a little bit more sense. Now, something that I think a lot of people might have skipped over or didn't really notice or see that impactful was the debuff change. They changed his Slice and Dice from -6% spirit res the person hit to a +4% damage amplification. This is arguably one of the biggest buffs in the patch because instead of only increasing spirit damage, the damage amplification increases every source of damage. That includes weapon, spirit, melee, and allied damage. It turns Slice and Dice into a much stronger teamfight ability and increases Shiv's own combo damage regardless of the build. That's why it's pretty impactful that you guys are not skipping over this small detail. Then you have things like his bloodletting, which Valve redistributed the upgrades. The tier 2, the old, was plus 15% incoming damage deferred. Now it's 35% damage deferred or cleared. This greatly improves Shiv's ability to erase stored damage after surviving a fight. This is in turn a kind of compensation to what they did to Slice and Dice essentially, because you're not able to get all that spirit from Mystic Reverb and stuff, so they're trying to make it to where bloodletting makes a lot more sense and actually matters a ton more. Then for the tier 3 upgrade, instead of the plus 50% deferred damage cleared, it's now 15% incoming damage deferred. Rather than instantly removing the stored damage, tier 3 now focuses on delaying more incoming damage. This means is mostly a power shift, where mid-game becomes stronger because tier 2 now provides huge survivability, where the late game emphasizes absorbing bursts rather than clearing damage immediately, so you can survive in fights a little bit longer. Now, probably the biggest significant buff to his entire get that I've seen in a minute is the Killing Blow, or his ultimate. This is where almost all of Shiv's power comes from this patch, because his base ability was just completely buffed all down the line. damaged troopers and neutrals, small quality of life improvement. It makes jungle clearing if you want to use your ultimate faster, and you get rage off of using your ults on NPCs, so this is pretty massive. Then secondly, the next big thing is that his executions instantly fill rage, which is a massive buff. Previously, Shiv often had to rebuild rage after securing a kill. Now, every execution immediately prepares him for the next fight. That means more bonus damage, better survivability, faster snowballing. Now, the next big thing that I think is pretty impactful is that his reset is now built into his base kit. Previously, this required a tier 3 upgrade. Now, every Shiv can chain executions from level 1 of the ability. This is incredibly enormous because it frees his upgrades path while dramatically increasing his early and mid-game carry potential. And trust me when I say this, this is an insane buff, and if you think this character was nerfed in any form, I mean, I just don't think you truly understand what this character is trying to do. Then some other tweaks were like his killing blow nerfs, where the full rage bonus was reduced from 12 to 8. Nothing super crazy, but the rest of his kit and the rest of the buffs he received kind of overlaps and outshines what those nerfs did. Then they also just reduced the base range from 18 meters to 12 meters. Let's be honest, it was a little crazy flying across the map. Some more big things were things with his upgrades. His tier 2 of his ultimate, full rage bonus was increased from 10 to 16%, which means increase in execution damage. Now, tier 3 execution the threshold is from 5 to 10%, which is an insanely high number. This character is inherently one of the biggest winners, mainly due to the fact that his ultimate was greatly buffed, as well as his serrated daggers. Yes, Slice and Dice was changed. You just need to change your build up now to things like Life Strike and Spirit Snatch, which is not necessarily the end of the world because he still receives a ton of HP from his bloodletting. That's what makes the character so strong. Now you can let me know what you think about Shiv in the comments down below. Personally, I think he's a winner because of all of the buffs he received, and if you just look at the damage numbers, it's pretty obvious to why this character is so good again, or even more so now. Now, Apollo is another major winner this patch because none of these changes reinvent his kit. Instead, they make his abilities significantly more reliable and rewarding. Nearly every buff addresses consistency, which is often more valuable than raw damage for a mechanically demanding hero. The first one is Repulse. Most of Apollo's buffs are centered around Repulse, and together they make these abilities much easier to use successfully. The first surrounds his tier 1, which is a -8 second cooldown instead of 7. This is a small but valuable buff. Repulse is Apollo's signature playmaking tool, so reducing his cooldown means more opportunities to push aggressive enemies, better uptime during extended fights, and less downtime if a repulse doesn't immediately lead to a kill. Another thing that they kind of changed was, I would like to say, his grace window. The targeting window increased from 1 second to 1.3. This is one of the most underrated buffs. Previously, after successfully channeling repulse, you only had 1 second to select your target. Now you have 30% more time. That means less pressure to instantly react, easier target selection during chaotic fights, and fewer missed opportunities because of timing. For newer Apollo players, this makes the ability much more forgiving. Then you have its cast range, which went from 25 meters to 35. Now, this is a massive quality of life improvement. A 40% increase in its range means Apollo can punish enemies much further away. Benefits include catching enemies that barely escape, following mobile heroes more constantly and consistently, and starting fights from safer position. Also, greater flexibility when choosing which enemy to engage. This dramatically increases Apollo's threat radius tenfold. Then you have his targeting angle. It went from 70 degrees to 90 degrees, another consistency buff. The wider targeting cone makes it much easier to lock onto the correct target, especially when multiple enemies are grouped together. Previously, slight camera adjustments could cause missed selections, so now the ability feels significantly smoother and a whole lot more reliable. I know for a fact it feels a lot better to play as well. Then you have Flawless Advance, and with that, they did a heal scaling. The spirit scaling increased from 1.0 to 1.3. Apollo now receives substantially more healing when building spirit power. This has several benefits: better sustain during fights, more effective dives, higher survivability and extended engagements, and increased value from spirit-focused builds. Rather than simply increasing damage, Valve is improving Apollo's ability to stay alive while fighting, meaning he's a much better duelist and 1v1 taker. Then you have Italilosa. That's what I like to call it. The tier 3 bonus damage went from 40 to 50%, a straightforward late game damage buff. Apollo's upgraded ultimate now hits significantly harder, giving him stronger burst potential against priority targets and making his late game scaling even more threatening. And when looking at the overall impact, every single change pushes Apollo toward being a more consistent duelist and skirmisher rather than simply increasing his raw numbers. The repulse buffs are especially impactful because they improve every stage of using his ability. It's available more often, it's easier to aim, it reaches further, and you have more time to choose your target. Combined with stronger healing from Flawless Advance and a harder hitting ultimate, Apollo becomes much more reliable in both solo fights and coordinated team fights. Some other notable characters that I believe were pretty decent winners were characters like Celeste, where her Dazzling Trick cooldown was reduced from 35 to 32, so you can spam it a lot more. Radiant Daggers were buffed, with both the duration and of course the spirit scaling from 0.56 to 0.63, so pretty notable. The Shining Wonder bounce range increased from 15.5 meters to 16.5, so a whole 1 meter increase, which is pretty nice. As well as the Shining Wondering damage increased by 10%, which is pretty significant as well. Some other notable characters are characters like Drifter, where they received a buff so you can, be a little bit more useful than, not. Some more are things like Mina, where her heroic missing health as damage was increased, her tier 3 was also increased in range, and her Nox Nostra damage was also increased from 4.45 to 4.6. as well as the damage increase from 1.74 to 1.9, so pretty significant. Another reason as to why Mina, in my opinion, is a pretty decent winner is because of what they did with the boons. Now, another reason why Mina is a lot better now is before with the boons. Before, people had a lot more HP in the early game, especially in the early stages of the laning phase. Because of the new boon system, you're getting HP a lot later, it's progressing slower, so Mina gets a lot more value because she gets HP from her rake doing health percent damage and everything like that. So this character is just excelling a lot more now than even before. I don't think the character last patch was particularly terrible per se, she was definitely playable, but she's a lot better now because, again, the boon system being changed. But anyways, those were my winners from this patch on June 30th. My opinions could be completely different from your own. Again, with the Shiv idea, it's mainly that Shiv is a lot stronger in the early game, and towards the end he falls off a little bit, fitting more into a tank role. But for the most part, the character still does an absurd amount of damage, and you can honestly just see that it is crazy in general. But yeah, like I said, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to like the video if you haven't done so already. Thank you.